So probably about 13 years ago, the designer and illustrator Dan Black of the studio Landland, who do a lot of kind of rock show posters and whatnot and record packaging, decided that he wanted to learn how to draw. So I went to school with Dan from about 2000 to 2003, and dude was always drawing. But what he meant was that he wanted to get past kind of like acceptable art school levels of drawing, and he wanted to actually learn how to draw. Like, he wanted to be able to describe space and textures and volumes through drawing, which sounds really funny to say out loud, but if you go to art school, you know that the idea of actually learning how to draw is like an absurd notion. So he decided to learn how to draw. And if you see his work now, there's no doubt that he can draw. I was at his studio today looking at something that he was working on, and it was beautiful, and the techniques that he's learned and developed since then are incredible. And he applies it to these awesome posters. So over this long period, he's been drawing and developing his drawing. And when he first decided to learn how to draw, he tried kind of every style and drew so many different things. And so he was visiting a class the other night, and one of my students, who's an illustrator, was talking about how he's an illustrator. He really wants to learn how to draw, but he doesn't know how to like do it and how to really motivate himself to do it. And Dan said something very telling, and I think it fits perfectly with my understanding of the world and how I view the ability to sort of successfully do anything in creative work. Dan. Sorry, I keep looking behind me to see if my dog wants to come out. Dan decided there's no way he's just going to sit down and learn how to draw. He doesn't have the discipline for it. He doesn't have the motivation for it. So instead what he did is, during this kind of formative period of his work where he's volunteering to do posters for everybody, he's doing paid posters, he's doing stuff for free, he's doing stuff as favors, he's just doing, at minimum, probably 4 posters a week, or 4 posters a month, I should say. So just grinding, hustling hard. And he drew every single one of those posters and tried different stuff with them and kind of evolved one into the next. And he talked about how at the beginning of the drawing, usually at the beginning of the drawing for the poster, he sucked, and by the end, he was demonstrably better and was kind of disappointed that he couldn't go back and redraw the beginning of it, but his time had run out and he needed to deliver this poster to the band. So he did a ton of drawing, and still does a ton of drawing. And as such, he got, miles ahead of where he was. But what was important was the idea that he knew he wasn't going to sit down and just learn how to draw. He's not just going to sit at a drafting table and start drawing. He had set up a situation that created the space to learn how to draw. And what that really means is he was gonna make the posters anyway, except that now every single poster, the crappy free poster, the uneven trade sort of poster, was another experiment in developing his ability to draw. So he created this situation where drawing was part of the deal, and he probably drew more in that period than he ever did when he was like a printmaker in art school or before that. He put in those 10,000 hours and then some. And it's a really smart move. And it's why he's so good right now, because he worked with the reality of his wiring and his patience and discipline. There's an interview with Burial, when like Burial first came out, the kind of like British post-dubstep dude that's ungodly boring. And he said this thing, and I think it's really critical. He said something about how he was obsessed with LB's snares, and he spent 2 years trying to figure out how to make that snare. So here's someone that's the exact opposite of Dan, that when this person needs to do something, they just dive all in, devote themselves, disciplined towards learning something with no immediate return. So Dan can't do that. I know I can't do that. Um, Frankly, I don't think most people can do that, but it's possible. So there's a really important lesson there in that both of them make their contribution by working in the way that makes sense to them. Burial is not going to be happy until he gets that sound right, and then he can fully commit to writing the songs, he can fully commit to making a record. If Dan was a musician, he probably would have instead said, every time I make a song, the snare will get better, and I won't worry about each individual one, I will just worry about each one building upon the last. The sort of key to be productive and to really get better and to be able to look back on your body of work as a development is to understand how you're wired and then double down on it. If you are scattered and ADD, you set up your creative work space process to embrace that. If you have monk-like levels of discipline, then you do the same. The problems are always going to be when you try to, it's one thing to experiment. It's one thing to experiment and be like, I'm going to try something totally different. It could be interesting. But it's another thing to force yourself to work in ways that are unnatural and uncomfortable for extended periods of time. It's going to kill your confidence. It's going to kill your development. You're never going to really settle down on, is any of this working? So those are some things to think about. Definitely go check out the work of Landland. There is a decent archive that will allow you to probably go back, not to the very beginning, but you can get back 10 years pretty easy and kind of see the development. All right, thanks for watching.